Well, you're looking. You feel well. That's good.
Gorgeous.
On this beautiful spring day. How about we say these in English today, so we get a sense of what's being said. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So these other paramitas are the six perfections: generosity, ethical discipline, patience, enthusiastic heroic effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. And those, the Shantideva text follows those six perfections. So today's text is wisdom. I'm sorry, it's meditative concentration. Today's chapter is meditative concentration. So the four immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And as we're on the Bodhisattva path, when we say these four immeasurable thoughts, when we finish that part, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, and so on. Then what we do as when we're on the Bodhisattva path is say, I will make this happen. I will do this. I will develop the immeasurable love that brings all sentient beings to happiness and its causes. I will develop the immeasurable compassion that frees all sentient beings from suffering and its causes. I will develop the immeasurable joy that takes delight in freeing sentient beings, helping sentient beings to be liberated from samsara. And I will develop the immeasurable equanimity to free all sentient beings, whether they're friends, enemies, strangers, whatever being they may be. As a bodhisattva, I will free all of them. And then you say, may I be blessed by my gurus and all of the Buddhas to have the power to accomplish this. So that's where we take these four immeasurables when we're on the Bodhisattva path. We take the responsibility for ourselves to do this. And it's pretty powerful. You know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the connection that we have to him really is through Venerable Robina, which is why I think we decided to have Venerable Robina's prayers this morning. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is one of her gurus. Her root guru was Lama Yeshe, who passed away years ago, and Lama Zopa, who recently passed away. And Kavita and I had a very brief encounter with Lama Zopa, but it was pretty powerful. It was when we were in India, and we were staying at Tushita, which is Lama Zopa was staying there at the same time. We were visiting our guru, Geshe Drakpo, who lived in the mountains a little bit above Tushita. And we were on our way back to Tushita, I think from Geshe Drakpa's, and Lama Zopa was driving out of the driveway of Tushita. And so Kavita and I sort of saw him coming and bowed down. And we came back up thinking he would be gone, but the car was still there. And Lama Zopa was just staring right into our eyes. It's like this electric connection coming from him. And that was it. That's the connection we've had, the actual connection we have, but it was quite strong and quite memorable. So I feel I have a connection with Lama Zopa. And every day when I do water bowl offerings, I go through a prayer that he devised for these offerings, and I find it to be very powerful and very meaningful, and it's made the water bowl offering part of my day, a very meaningful and touching practice, and I thank him for that. Okay. Now we just read through the seven limb prayer. If you have practiced the seven limb practice, visualize as we go through this prayer.
I think it's good to remember that the guru is in front of you.
Yeah. You visualize the guru, the Buddhas, all in front of you as we say this. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And finally, we do a mandala offering. So visualize, a completely purified universe, completely purified consciousness, purified form. Everything is working in perfect interdependence. And make this visualization in the form of a mandala, beautiful mandala, and offer it to the Buddhas and the gurus and all the bodhisattvas in space in front of us. Zajipaki Jokshin Meto Tramri Ram Lingji Nidegyan Pagi Sangye Jingdu Migde Urwagi Drokunam Dakshinga Chepasho. Then we send it into the hearts of the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas as we say, Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryataya. Okay. So we're these last two chapters, chapter 8 and 9, are very long. So I'm going to be splitting them up. So today we're going to do part 1 of meditative concentration, and next week we'll do part 2, and we'll see if we need to do any more parts, because they're actually, in some cases, they're well more than 3 times as long as some of the other chapters. So and they're very important chapters, so we need to take the time to go through them. So here, Shantideva is talking about the actual practice of meditation. And when we're talking about the Bodhisattva path and developing bodhicitta, the main meditation that we're going to be doing is one that's called equalizing self with others and exchanging self with others, which is a very powerful practice, and that we'll get into next week, because the second part of the chapter deals with that particular practice. The first part of the chapter deals with talking about the kinds of meditation there are and what we need to do to make our environment conducive for meditation. It also talks about, Wulstan Fletcher talks about the types of bodhicitta we've talked about. There's aspirational bodhicitta, which in the first few chapters of this text, Shantideva was getting us enthused about what bodhicitta is and getting the aspiration going in us to want to do that. Then there is engaged bodhicitta. Engaged bodhicitta is when we actually start the practices of a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva being an awakened being, one who's on the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So when we talk about bodhicitta, then, engaged bodhicitta, there are 2 aspects to engaged bodhicitta. And one is, it has to do with conventional and ultimate reality, or relative and ultimate reality. So there's relative bodhicitta, which is all the practices we're doing, which is, what we're doing right now. And when we go do the practices of meditation, that's relative bodhicitta. When we do practices of compassion and mind training and things like that, that's all relative bodhicitta. In meaning that we're doing these practices with this awakened heart and mind that wants to benefit all sentient beings. That's the purpose now as bodhisattvas. That's why we're doing these practices. It's not just for ourselves alone anymore, because we're suffering so much. We've sort of opened our heart up and realized, because of the interdependent nature of everything, that we are connected to all sentient beings, not just humans and not just animals, but other beings that we're not even aware of, that exist in different realms. And the more you get into this, the more you can really start to feel a connection and a real strong desire to help, a real strong desire to help. And so all of our practices then, as bodhisattvas, have this, it's relative bodhicitta. It's this desire to help others. So our practices are geared towards helping others, getting ourselves to a point where we can best help others. And then so that's relative bodhicitta. Then there's ultimate bodhicitta. And in Buddhism, whenever you're talking ultimate, you're talking wisdom, you're talking emptiness, you're talking the nature of reality. And that's what ultimate bodhicitta is. And that's the next chapter, chapter 9, which is on wisdom, which is the nature of the self and the nature of all phenomena. So just pointing that out, there's relative bodhicitta and there's ultimate bodhicitta, and they go along with the two wings, compassion and wisdom of the path. All righty, so now Shantideva goes into, he starts out with the importance of meditative concentration. So it's a concentration kind of meditation. And Shantideva was in Nalanda University in the 8th century. It's the monastery, which was a university. And so when we think of monasteries, we tend to think, because of how we were raised and the culture we were raised, we kind of think of contemplative, like Trappist monks. So you go to these monasteries and everybody's just very quiet, and they're meditating all day and they're praying all day, and it's like that, which seems like a very great conducive environment for meditation. But when you're talking about the monasteries in ancient India or Tibet, or even today in Tibet, they're nothing like that at all. They are like a beehive of activity. You've got ages everywhere from 7-year-old boys all the way up to 90-year-old men in the monasteries.
Maybe Tracy could say something about her.
Well, Tracy and Brian were just at Drepung.
We were.
Yeah. Describe it a little bit.
Well, when we went to visit Geshe Nima in his residence area, there were just that. There was the elder that everybody went to. He had his own room, and they all, revered him as like the head guy of their area. But they're 7-year-olds, 4-year-olds running around too. That those are the new young monks that are too young to be going to school, but then the older monks are taking care of those monks. And there's a whole variety, and it's just really one big family where they're all kind of sharing space, sharing meals, and taking care of one another at all different levels of whatever that looks like, for the age group they're in. And then once they're school age, then they're off to school. We went to the school that Geshe Nima, was principal of for 2 rounds, and he's revered there because of all the work he did to develop the school. So it's a really close-knit family, of a bunch of monks. It's very interesting.
It's like a close-knit family of a couple of thousand people.
Yeah, but because they're all the different houses. Yeah. It kind of like you've got this overreaching, there are all these thousands of monks, but then they're broken up into these houses. And I don't know, then they might even broken up even more by floor, by, relationship, like how they know. And there's always one older monk that has a few younger monks around him. And the age differences are usually about 10 years or something like that, maybe 20 in some cases. So And of course, then the little monks. So
You
yeah.
can see it's not like, a Trappist monastery.
No,
So
no.
Shantideva himself was, as you recall, the stories about Shantideva is that the monks at Nalanda didn't like him because he kept to himself. He was trying to meditate. He was trying to get into meditative concentration like a yogi would in this, hive of activity. And so that's when we were, and I remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was Brian who was saying, maybe we need to become, go off somewhere and, so we can meditate, so we can do all these practices. But, if we actually went to one of these monasteries, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. As a matter of fact, Geshe Dragpa, for many years, wanted to sort of leave the monastic environment so that he could go up onto the mountain that we saw him on in his little hut and meditate. And His Holiness actually wouldn't let him go until he had done certain tasks. I think the final one is he took care of the livestock, and then he was allowed to go on retreat. Same with Geshe Nyima. Geshe Nyima would like to now go on some kind of retreat. So they're actually trying to get away from the monastery to actually do the kind of meditative practices. So we shouldn't feel that we're in a situation that's really that different, in terms of, idle time from monks or nuns, Buddhist monks or nuns. They are very, very busy people. So we need to think, how can we, what is it that we need to do in order to give ourselves the kind of solitude and space that you would need to do some of these meditative concentration practices? And basically, it's up to each one of us to figure that out for ourselves, to find out how we can make time in the day, in the morning. For instance, this doesn't always happen, but Kavita and I have been, sometimes we'll get up at 4 a.m, sometimes 5 a.m. If we get up later than that, it's too late because other people in the house are coming down and they want to make breakfast. So that time is over. And so I'm sure for many of you, your household might be like that. So early in the morning is quite good. If you can go to bed by 9 or 10 or something like that, it's not that difficult to get up at 4. And everything is so quiet, and there's really the time and the space to do some of these practices. And it could be, it could just be analytical meditation. You could just be thinking about, you could just be reading a text, anything like that, just to get into the practice, the habit of finding a space and a time where you can do this. It doesn't mean that we can't make huge progress just because we live in a Western culture. We have jobs and we have families and we have husbands and wives and children. Yes, we have all of those, and those things are very important. We don't want to leave those things. They're very important, but we can find ways to make the time necessary to get into some of these practices. Because without, His Holiness says, without meditative concentration, we're not going to be able to go very far on the path. So meditation is basically a way to transform our mind. So His Holiness talks about the kinds of meditation that we start with. And so there's a meditation that's called single pointed concentration. And that's where you're just trying to focus your mind on one thing and keep it there. That is called samadhi in Sanskrit. That's called samadhi. What we want to get then through that single pointed concentration is to a level where our mind is then just very calmly abiding and very serene. It's just focused on whatever the object of our meditation is very tranquil and very serene. So when we're practicing samadhi, practicing single pointed concentration, you're always trying to bring yourself back to the object. Your mind is all over the place. The idea is that through samadhi, then we get to what's called shamatha. Shamatha is calm abiding. So when you get to this calm abiding state, you no longer have the distractions, because one of the huge problems to meditation or anything we're doing on the path or anything we're doing in our life, we talked about this last time, dunzi, distractions that pull us away, especially if we're on this bodhisattva path. this idea that we want to be of benefit to all sentient beings, and that we have practices to do, we have training to do. We're like these spiritual warriors, right? So a spiritual warrior cannot have all of these distractions pulling them away from what the practice is and the training is. So meditation is extremely important to for us to eliminate distractions, because when we start with a single point of concentration, that's exactly what we're doing. We're dealing with distractions. We're seeing how distracted our mind is. It's all over the place. And we keep reining it in, pulling it back to the object, right? And so the object, then you can have, once you've had this, once you achieve this mental, this calm abiding, which is the shamatha, then you can easily focus analytically on any kind of thing.
Hey, I have an idea related to this. And I'll send a survey by email, but we have the 8-part teaching from Geshe Drakpa on video. He gave
Oh, yeah.
an 8-part teaching on single pointed concentration, you know, kind of a while ago, but we could do it just a Zoom only, say on, you know, some night of the week. So I'll just out of curiosity, I'll send an email to see if anybody's interested in that.
I think it's a good idea because it's,
I have recently re-listened to it and am kind of blown away at how great it was. And I think as the organizers, I mean, I think you were their driver, as I recall, Don. You picked them up and brought them every time, and we all had roles to do. I think it was hard to really absorb the content of the teaching in a way.
well, also now that we're further along in our studies and our practice, I think the teachings will hold more for us. I mean, Geshe Drakpa was a great meditator. I mean, he was in meditative retreat for 9 years, you know, and he was well respected by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So
anyway, I'll probably do this.
Yeah.
Start that.
I think it's a good idea.
And we could just do it on Zoom, and it's better than watching YouTube videos about how to tie sailor knots.
Well, those
were the visual when they were giving that. Wasn't there a storm or something going on? And all the trees at Los Patios?
There may have been.
May
I
have
just
been.
remember looking at this, it was dark. And they were talking about all this, it was like a visualization. And I'm just like, you're just going through this forest looking out the window.
I do remember that. I do remember that. Yeah, you had some kind of experience.
I didn't get anything they were saying, but
Yeah, but you had an experience. Yeah. So when we go to the next chapter, right, which is on wisdom, and that's talking about emptiness, basically. His Holiness says that it's not going to be possible for us to have a realization of emptiness unless we can have this meditative concentration, reach this calm abiding state, and then we'll be able actually to have a chance of realizing emptiness itself. So it's extremely important. He also says that without meditative concentration is a huge help in making our positive actions stick. In other words, if we can generate positive actions, we can generate sona, right? But without having a disciplined mind, if we become scattered, then His Holiness says those positive actions will never reach their full potential. They won't. So this training our minds like this is a way to actually train our sona, our positive potential, to reach its full realization. So the meditation is extremely important. You know, if we're interested in this path, we need to find a way. We need to find the space. We need to find the time, and we need to find the motivation, the energy, the desire to do it. And if we can get this fire in our heart about being a bodhisattva, you know, being this spiritual warrior, sort of like you know, when you think of Luke Skywalker, how he felt when he realized, I am a Jedi Knight, I am going to do this. You know, that, like I said, that movie Star Wars is a great analogy for the Buddhist path and the Bodhisattva path in particular. And I think we probably maybe look at that in a couple of weeks, have an outdoor night and a Sangha get together. But to get that kind of energy going in ourselves that we see this is the most important and the best thing I could do with my life. Because it is, when you look at it, nothing else actually makes sense. Nothing else matters as much as helping all of us, get out of the suffering that we're in, get out of this cycle of samsara and achieve, happiness. That's more important than anything. So if you have that fire to do that, then you'll have the motivation to do the meditation, you'll have the motivation to study, you'll have the motivation to do all of the practices. So we have to sort of we'll help one another too, to be excited about this, the path that we're on.
Just personal experiences over the years, like where I'm at now, like this aspiration is the only thing that is giving my life like any sense of meaning. I mean,
Yeah,
I've bought new cars, I bought all the guitars that I never have time to play. I've been to enough traveling places, I mean, I can, had enough great steaks and lobster and all that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, okay, there is no other sense object that I really can taste, hear, touch, see, that's gonna really make a difference. All the effort in my younger years of just, trying to do that, is like, wow.
You could say you've arrived.
It's like, what,
I mean,
I have nothing, there's none of that stuff I
and
do.
that's
Right.
where most people have to be before they start to,
yeah.
because we're always worried about, what are my friends gonna think? I don't want them to think I'm avoiding them.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of us are in those situations.
Well, see, I'm kind of lucky.
I mean, he addresses it.
There's no friends left. You guys are my friends.
I was gonna say, what do you call this?
I know. It's my friends.
They accept her. She's going to pair with Louise, and it was just. I have friends in their 70s. They travel.
They're still trying.
And I'm
They're
just
still
like,
trying.
you want to go to Louise? And
This is a distraction.
I'm like, well, as rich as you are, one day.
Yeah,
Are you gonna buy my ticket?
yeah. And so that is what the Tibetans call dunzi, which means
Well,
distraction.
there's lots of.
You're just you fill your life.
Trying one more trip.
I know.
Yeah, we talked about this last time. We all do this. We fill our life with all of these distractions. I mean, that's what samsara is all about.
Yes.
And then what happens is we get to the end of our life.
Yeah.
And we've done nothing but distract ourselves. And we haven't prepared ourselves for the next life.
So I do think though, it happens that if you are in a position, like Kavita said, you've done all this and you realize, it doesn't really help. It's so when you have friends that are in that situation, you can't expect them to understand you
No,
or
no.
what you're doing, and you can't be annoyed with them because it is kind of a Western. I'm sorry, it's a Western thing. Growing up where you grew up, I'm sure you see this.
Oh, actually, Don.
And, that's like,
For Tibetans, the only fun thing is to go on pilgrimage.
yes,
So our travel would be
Oh
pilgrimage.
my God.
Our picnic would be pilgrimage.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It must be something for you to make sure your kids understand that
Mhm.
too, because being the age that they're in that kind of precarious,
Yeah.
don't wander off.
That's right.
Okay, so Shantideva actually addresses precisely what you're talking about, which is one of the things I find about this text is how he hits the mark. I mean, the psychology hasn't changed from the 8th century to now. It's the same thing. So in the second stanza, he says, the first stanza talks about developing concentration. Because if we don't develop concentration, we'll be caught in the fangs of our afflictions, basically is how he puts it. So the second stanza is, in solitude, the mind and body are not troubled by distraction. Therefore, leave this worldly life and totally abandon mental wandering. Because of loved ones and desire for gain, we fail to turn away from worldly things. These then are the first things to renounce. The prudent should conduct themselves like this. Penetrative insight utterly eradicates afflicted states. Knowing this, first search for calm abiding found by people who are happy to be free from worldly ties. So this goes back to what we were talking about. We're not monks or nuns. We're not going to go. He talks about going off into the forest, going off into a cave. We cannot do that. Most of us cannot do that. Some people try. So we have to find our own personal forest space, our own personal cave space in the space that we're in. We have to make the time for that. And we can do that. We can do that. But we have to have the motivation to do it. Then he talks about the question of emotional attachment that we have to friends and family and things like this. And there are, as we talked about before, that we divide people up into three groups. We have friends, the people that we like, our family and friends, the people we like or we call our friends. Then we have the people we don't like, we don't want to be around, we can't stand them, they're the wrong side of the political spectrum or whatever it is. We call those our enemies, right? And then everybody else, just strangers, we don't care about them. So we have, for instance, if we have our own spouse or our own child or things like that, they're very, very important to us. We're very, very attached to them, you know, and we put that in their group of that, what we consider ours. This is mine. I love these people. However, from the point of view of your enemy, who also has a child, you know, that child is just as dear to them as your child is to you. And from the child's point of view, there's no difference. You know, the child, it's not like your enemy's child is a bad child and your child is a good one. They're all the same. So when we start to develop some equanimity, and this is what we must do, we must eliminate this idea of friends, enemies, and strangers. We have to see everybody as the same. This is why Lama Zopa's practice of the water bowl offering is so deep and profound, because what he does is he goes through every realm, all the hell beings, the ghosts, the animals, the humans, the gods and demigods, the people who are in the form and formless realms, and you're saying, I'm going to work for the benefit of all these people who are suffering in samsara. So it actually connects, you start to feel connected. It's simply by doing it over and over and over again. You basically are not scared to look at beings in the hell realms. You basically see, wow, there's suffering there. You're not afraid to look at what are called the hungry ghosts. You don't want to block it out. You want to actually engage with it. So these practices help us to develop equanimity so that we stop the friends, enemies, and strangers.
Is in a similar way, and this is something that I feel is so important for practitioners, is to have a level head and to realize that even in this conventional world that we all seem to share, there are realms, and that in the same way that we would have equanimity towards beings in a God realm or a hell realm or a hungry ghost realm, the groups that you have been conditioned to see in a certain way, in other words, through the media, your family, whatever information inputs, the internet, all this stuff your brain has been colonized by intentional messaging from people, some of it benevolent and some of it just straight up manipulative. And I would say it's all manipulative when you're talking about the media. So what I was just going to say was, don't let yourself be conned into demonizing the labeled groups in our world that you've been conditioned to have negative reaction to. I'm still shocked when I hear people in Buddhist teachers talking about the people, the MAGA people, as if they're evil. Yeah. They are not evil. They are people just like you, or just well, and even in this life, all they're trying to do is find a correct, wholesome, happy way to live. And I'm here to say, if you listen and with equanimity, you will hear they're not very different. They're not, in most ways, not different.
Well, basically what Buddhism will say is,
but that's the main point.
We all want to be happy. You know, none of us want to suffer. So, and that cuts through everything, you know, and we have to, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think there's a huge amount of manipulation going on. This is samsara after all, and we shouldn't expect it to be nirvana. But as a bodhisattva in training, we need to start to get wise, you know, about what's going on and be able to cut through that and see through that and actually try to connect with the hearts of others rather than the image that's being projected onto them.
Another level to that too is.
Perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So a perfect example of just the media manipulation is all the brouhaha going on around the Dalai Lama kissing the
Right.
little boy.
Oh yeah. Oh wow.
That was actually funny because lost in translation.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
with him.
Yeah, I think
Or anything.
It should inform you, if the media can create a global frenzy such as that we just saw on the Dalai Lama. Just imagine to what extent it is happening with all these other personalities, political and showbiz personalities that we have all these crazy opinions about that are just merely fed to us.
Yeah. It's quite a big issue going on now. The media and the effect it has on the world population. And so we have to be aware of that.
It's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I mean,
keep your children off of it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, basically, you have to look at actually who's controlling the media, what's behind all of that, and what we'll find is it's this huge, big, multinational kinds of corporations. Very few of them, maybe 6 or 7, and they're controlling the whole thing.
Yeah.
So what's behind that? What are they after?
This term in a Buddhist thing that there's an attempt to colonize your brain, your mind, with their paradigm. When you think about that, you don't want to give your worldview, your paradigm, you don't want to give power to someone else to form that for you. And if you're relying on the external media,
Right.
just from an emotional point of view, it's just gonna happen
So,
and you won't even know it.
With Buddhism, we are buying into a different paradigm.
Yeah.
You might put it that way. And we need to take that paradigm and then see everything through that lens. So, you know, we think about, so somebody said, what do you say? That everyone has been our mother, right? That's one of the things that the Buddhists say. All beings have been our mother. So when you're talking about friends, enemies, and strangers, if you think in those terms, and then also think of the ones who were so close to us now. Well, we have just basically come together for a very short period of time. I think Wulstan Fletcher says it's like you met at a train station or something, you know, and for a very brief time you come together, and then you're going to go your separate ways. This happens to all of us. Who we're married to, our parents, our children, we're all going to go our separate ways. We've come together for a very short period of time. So and this is the same with everybody. So we should make the most of that. We should, rather than be angry with one another, we should say, we just have a short period of time. Why don't we be kind with one another? Let's try something different. Let's try a new paradigm, you know. Let's see each other as you know, the mothers that may have been in other lives, and or our child, you know. So if we look at things that way, we can begin to slowly change. You know, basically it comes down to a question of prejudice is what's happening. What's happening, say, with the media, people are being made to be prejudiced against one another. You know, a prejudgment of who they are, and we don't want that. We all know we don't want that. We know prejudice is bad. So we have to, as bodhisattvas in training, work against that and create a new paradigm, you know.
You know, and also, I hear in all of this, one of the basic tenets or teachings is right view, you know.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, all of this is incorrect view. You know, if you're in the view of oneness, you know, we're all kind of here because we're not. We're trying to get there, but
Right.
so all of this is separation and looking through that lens. All of it.
Huge. The view is
And
so
even
important.
different, you know, like Buddhism, as Buddhists, it's, you know, that's our work and our aspiration to do this. But so then you can look at Catholics and this and that and that, and underneath it, they also are trying to find a way for happiness in the spiritual life, and one would hope that there could be some sort of consensus or coming together, or maybe that's the next step of recognizing that it's like we're not all separate groups here, you know? And
I think there are many people who do
yeah,
that,
it's
who
just
do
not what
want to
comes out
recognize that.
of
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
you know,
yeah.
but if it could, it would be wonderful.
I think you have to assume everybody starts out with an altruistic
Yeah.
notion, and then politics happens,
Yeah,
and you gotta stay there.
Yeah.
In your group.
So the view, what you say is extremely important. And that's what the next chapter is about, is actually the Buddhist view. When we're talking about their view, they're talking about emptiness, you know, the
Or dependent arising.
dependent arising, basically emptiness, dependent arising, everything's a dependent arising. And so it's empty of existing, of self-existence, individual self-existence. There are many, many ways to sort of approach this view. We'll go into that. There's a great bit on impermanence that comes up later in this, which helps us to see things in a very different way than we're used to. So the next thing Shantideva says is that we need to stop our habits of clinging attachment and then aversion, because these habits drive us. They drive us. And of course, they arise out of an ignorance of the view, of the actual nature of reality. It arises out of a feeling that everything is individual, everything is separate. And this causes the clinging and then the aversion. When we don't, you know, we grasp to get what we want, and when we don't get what we want, we have aversion. Either it's fear or it's anger or whatever it may be. So he says in stanza 7, if I crave for other beings, a veil is cast upon the perfect truth. Wholesome disillusion for samsara melts away. And finally, there comes the sting of pain. So he's saying we should have like this wholesome disillusionment in what samsara is. However, when we're craving for other beings, you know, it sort of casts a veil over that whole thing. We kind of go, oh, samsara is nice, you know. Look at this person I'm craving after, right? He gets into a whole thing about sexual craving because of he was dealing with celibate monks when he gave this talk at Nalanda University. He was talking to a group of celibate monks, and so he naturally had to deal with this issue of craving for another person. But had Shantideva been a nun or female dakini talking to a group of nuns, well, then he would have been talking about craving after men. So today, where we have all kinds of sexual orientations, it's a very simple thing to just look at it from your own particular sexual orientation and not see this as some way that Shantideva is putting down woman. He's not. It's just whoever it is we're craving after, whatever it is that we're going for. This is what he's talking about. So, but that comes a little bit later. So then Shantideva continues. He says, my thoughts are all for them, and thus my life is frittered by. My family and friends all change and pass, for whom the changeless Dharma is cast out. So similar to what we were talking about earlier. We have all these friends and the family, and we're all talking about all these different things, frittering away, really frittering away. Shopping, going on trips, whatever it may be, you know? And so we fritter it away. So we have to, and there's a kind of craving towards that, you know? And so we have to see we don't want to continue with that habit, because what we're going to do is fritter away the precious human rebirth we've got, the opportunity we have right now. So it's just a question of pulling back a little. It doesn't mean, he says, be nice to these people, be courteous with these people, be friendly and helpful, but don't get entangled.
And don't be patronized.
Don't just, he basically says, keep a little distance.
Yeah.
Keep a little distance, because you don't want to get sucked into this kind of way of frittering things away, you know, this samsaric view of life. We all know what that is. We all know, we've been around friends. What you do is, he even says this in one of his stanzas. He says, what you do when you get together with your friends in samsara is basically you talk about how great you are, how you hate this and so, and how bad they are. And, you're just, it's a self-aggrandizement, or it's putting somebody else down. That's the conversation.
It's having an opinion means
Yeah.
that someone's got to be
Right,
wrong.
right.
It's,
And if we spend
I mean,
all
if you
our
think
time doing
about it,
that,
it's just, oh my God.
it's kind of disgusting when you
I
actually
mean,
think that.
the
We
trouble
do
we
it.
go to, travel to the perfect place, have the perfect meal, stay at the perfect hotel. And like, I was thinking of some of our trips that we've been on, it's like, God, what a waste.
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably all have this experience.
But you have to have the experience. So
You've
you
gone
don't
to,
have to do anything.
watch White Lotus.
You've gone to a restaurant with somebody, a friend or something, and it's a very nice restaurant, you're gonna, it's nice food, and the person who you're with just finds fault with the food, finds fault with the waitress, finds fault with the place, and it ruins the entire experience.
Yeah.
And, after a while, you just go, what is the point of this? What's the point of doing this?
Well, I mean, I guess someone said it earlier. The point is, I think, to have experiences, to be able to then differentiate between one experience and another, to see the value in one. I mean, I think every experience has a value.
That's a good point you just made. That is a good
And
point.
whether you're traveling or not, maybe you can travel and be of benefit to people that you might not otherwise have access to if you're not there.
Right, well,
Of
I
course,
mean,
of course.
obviously, like Venerable
You
Rebecca
know?
travels a lot, she's going around teaching Dharma. I mean, I think we
Right,
have
right,
to
right.
be honest and we just need to be straight up with ourselves about our motivation when we do stuff.
Well,
But
absolutely.
Tracy, you're right. If we haven't experienced the effect of what it is to be frittering things away with our friends and on trips and things, then we don't know the difference. We don't
Exactly.
know the difference. And we can you can still go to dinner, you can still take trips, but you can make a difference with that.
And then the intention of going and all of those things can be totally shifted. You
Exactly.
might go to a different restaurant versus another fast food type of place because, we want to put better quality food in our body so we have good health and we can live longer. We could practice Dharma longer. We can, hopefully grow our Dharma practice during this lifetime while we've got this precious rebirth and then be of benefit to others.
Yeah, I mean, Buddhism always says there's nothing wrong with pleasant experiences. The problem
Exactly.
comes,
I mean, we don't need to live in misery.
The problem comes with our attachment and craving for them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You'd be wise enough to
Right.
notice. Like I said, if you go to a good restaurant with a good friend and you make the best night out of it and have a really good feeling coming back. Yeah,
That's good.
it. Now don't put an attachment to say, okay, tomorrow we gotta go to the next one and then do it again. I think it comes down to attachment and your inner wisdom to make the best out of every situation. Even if you go with a bad friend, let's say, right? You have a good intention of going, but somehow you started complaining about the waitress, soup being cold. Yeah. Now, what do? You do your best to take the best out of the evening. And don't attach and come. Because it's, again, the other thing is it's pointless to teach somebody right then and there to be say, oh, you cannot be complaining, be positive. It doesn't work.
No,
So
It doesn't.
just, try not to be with her on adding the negativity, but you can be positive on your own realm and then no attachment and that's how we take. Because you cannot say, going to a fine restaurant, eating good food with a good friend is a waste of time. Again, we live in Samsara, that's a part of the life. And just make the best time out of it in a positive way. Yes. Despite the fact that there's a lot of negative in that restaurant, and then you come home and don't make an attachment.
I think I have to look at myself. They have this, some of it comes down to you only have so many hours in the day. And I can say, oh, I didn't have time to think about the Dharma today. Meanwhile, I can tell you the 27 things that I somehow had time to do. And, I think there's a way in which I think that's one of the elements of this discussion for me is what I've seen.
Yeah, last time he was talking, Shantideva was talking about the urgency that we should feel because time's running out,
Mm.
and so we
Yeah.
want to take the time now.
But yeah.
You could make.
You're
it up.
young yet.
Oh.
When you get to be my age, I'll go, shit, I don't have time to eat.
When you get to be my age.
I know, really. How long? We've heard that one. So,
Where if you have achieved a one pointedness or have those experiences or are aware of the correct view, you can flit it around. I mean, you may not want to flit around,
That's
away
true,
from your
right.
time, but you can also, part of the practice can be, and no matter what situation, and it's all sacred, it's all holy, and the person that you're with is oneness, and it can become, all that external stuff of whether it's a restaurant or not a restaurant, or whether it's fine or not fine, kind of is very secondary.
That's
You can also, your head has to be in the right place.
yeah,
To keep it,
It's all,
and then you can enjoy it, but it's sometimes out of being human, it's a little,
yeah.
you're like, why am I with this?
I think this is why they're suggesting make some space for ourselves, because we actually need to practice. We can't just keep doing the same thing and think we're gonna fix it.
Well, yeah.
We have to make the space to practice and sort of change our mind through meditation, through analyzing, through studying,
Yeah.
And then we can bring it out into any situation.
Yeah.
And have equanimity, like you're saying, I mean, His Holiness says along these lines, he says it's better to keep our distance from such people, these frittering, chattering people, right? He says when we should avoid offending them. When we do meet them, we should be pleasant and considerate and do what we can to make them happy without becoming too familiar. Without becoming too familiar, without getting into the whole, the whole story. So to sort of keep, and Shantideva says this too, just make a little bit of distance, it's for, he says, because nothing good will come out of when you engage in that kind of, nothing good will actually come out of it.
Well, experiences like living around Lama Pasan. And I would always notice with things that he wouldn't be mean, but he kind of like, well, I won't be able to go, or I won't, and he would say later, he said, well,
Yeah, sometimes it's just learning how to say no.
and he was very diplomatic about it. I would watch him, and I was, and he knew what he was up against, and rather than wander off with people that wanted to take him, come with us.
Yeah.
And he was.
Let us corrupt you.
Exactly, and I was really impressed.
yeah.
I don't know what you're doing. It's like.
Yeah.
He was very solitary. These are my boundaries, but he never said that,
It's true. We all need some kind of boundaries.
Yeah.
If we don't have those, then we become susceptible.
Yeah.
So it is important, and
It
it's kind of boundaries. These to me seem like the best kind of boundaries, the Dharma boundaries.
Yeah.
Because it's, especially when the whole purpose is to be a benefit to everyone, and you think of yourself in training, then of course you don't want to be angry with your friends who are, you want all of it to work out, but sometimes you do need the boundaries. Shantideva then goes on about the 8 worldly concerns, and those are, of having things, and not having things, having a good reputation and having a bad reputation, being praised or being criticized. What's the other one? Being comfortable or being uncomfortable, being comfortable or being uncomfortable. So he talks about this, and he says that
You mean physical pain?
physical pain and discomfort.
Comfortable is almost, you can interpret it too many
Well,
ways.
it's, yeah,
But it has to do.
It has to do
I'm
with-
cold or I'm hot.
I'm cold or I'm hot, or I hurt or I don't hurt, right. I'm sick or I'm not sick. He says a wise person doesn't crave for things because things like wealth and property and reputation and celebrity will naturally fade to nothing. I mean, think about all the famous people throughout history and all the celebrity and all the wealth, and where are they now? They couldn't take any of that stuff with them. So he basically is saying we shouldn't be too attached to those kinds of things. We can enjoy them, but not cling on to them, not grasp onto them, you know, because then that's all we do. That's what our life becomes about, is that. And we will sometimes, I mean, people will die to protect their wealth and their property and things like that. So Shantideva continues and he says, and it's on the 8 worldly concern themes. He says, why should I be pleased when people praise me? Others there will be who scorn and criticize. And why be despondent when I'm blamed, since there'll be others who think well of me? So many are the leanings and wants of beings that even Buddha couldn't please them all. That's something to think about. You know, if the Buddha couldn't please everybody, what makes us think we could, right? I'll give up such, of such a wretch as me, there's no need to even speak whether I could please them all. I'll give up such concerns with worldly things. People scorn the poor who have no wealth. They also criticize the rich who have it. What pleasure can derive from keeping company with people such as these, so difficult to please? In kindness, childish beings take no delight unless their own desires are satisfied. So what he's saying is childish beings who are not trying to develop a view, who are not trying to develop bodhicitta, who are just going with the flow of samsara, they don't take any delight in kindness unless it's towards them or things that have to do with them, me and mine. That's what they. So you just, often when they see somebody else who's having something is going well for them, they get, we get jealous, or we'll criticize. This is the samsaric ego self-grasping view, and basically saying since we're trying to overcome this ego self-grasping and go to a different view, it doesn't benefit us to keep hanging around people who are just there. They don't, it's benefits us to hang around, people who are on the same path. Mm-hmm. That's where the benefit comes, because we can help one another. It's good to see these people, to be kind to these people, but to make all of our time with those people is a problem, to spend all of our time with those people. And sometimes it's very difficult because they're members of your own family and they're living with you, So we have to figure out how to do it. All right, so he, again, he talks about the conducive conditions for meditation. Like I said, he's talking about going into the woods and how great it would be. And so I felt I needed to insert something here because we're in a different situation. And so what we need to decide, what really matters to us in the long term. What patterns of thought and behavior do we want to be happening in our mind stream? What patterns of thought and behavior do we want our mind stream to take with us, to be part of our continuum? So if we think of ourselves as bodhisattva spiritual warriors in training, we can make huge progress precisely because of the worldly situation we're in. We can. It's sort of like the way I was thinking about it. It's like, when an Olympic athlete is working to make themselves stronger, to whatever it's going to be, the running or the weightlifting, whatever it is, they actually take delight in working hard, and they take delight in having a lot of resistance. Because the more resistance they have, because they know they're in training, the more resistance they have, the stronger they get. So if we think of ourselves as spiritual warriors in training, we can do really well in this worldly situation. We're not like being protected by being in solitude and being away from everything. We're right in the middle of it. And we can really, if we bring the Dharma into every experience we have, then we can use this situation to our benefit, and huge benefit, I think. Really a lot of benefit, like a athlete in training. We're a spiritual warrior in training, and we can use all the resistance that's out there to actually make us stronger if we know what we're doing, if we know the direction we want to take our mind, and we don't fall prey to all of the ego stuff that's going on, but we keep very clear about what we're doing. Then I think this worldly situation we're in right now, with everything going on, is great. We can make huge progress. I mean, I really, really believe that. I don't think we have to go off somewhere. I think we can do a lot right here and make a lot of progress in this lifetime that we have. What else is a human life for? You know, I mean, this is the best use of it. So we should never give up. We should never give up with it. So
Maybe
now
we can actually make a difference.
yeah, exactly. Make a difference right now in samsara. You know, look at the Dalai Lama. He has been out there until recently. All he did was travel the world constantly. The energy that man has, unbelievable. You know, and he was in the world doing it, and that's amazing, just amazing.
I mean, he totally changed my life.
Oh, I mean, he's actually changed the world. He has.
Yeah.
He has. So it's you know, this current thing about the thing with the boy and the Italian.
That's just media.
It's media weirdness, because when you see it, it's so
It's funny, I missed it all.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I just.
Saw the
I don't
thing about
actually
the-
know
honey,
which
well,
one.
I was-
Oh, yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Even- Yeah, I know one of the officials, Tibetan officials, said that it was all just like, what the
Well,
Yeah.
you watch the whole.
It
We
is-
watched
Yeah.
No, it happened back in February, but the media sort of picked up. I don't know what they, you know,
Posits that it's
Yeah.
the Chinese media.
we don't know. I mean, it's
Always
just,
in people's minds.
We don't know.
It's the Chinese, it's just.
We don't know.
everybody else.
So that they pushed it out. Why 2 months later?
Yeah.
Because there's
Over
some,
2 months ago, see, I
Yeah.
don't know the
There's-
timeline.
right. so you have to dig into the story to understand what the whole picture is. This is, you just pointed out one of the big problems. We read the headlines, but
Yeah,
you don't
that's-
read the story.
Well, because it's kind of hard to find the real story.
Right, well, you can though.
They're bits and pieces, but by the time, what was I doing? You know?
Anyway, it was a fundraising.
okay, you're all ready? We're gonna talk about sex now, okay? Yeah, I got everybody's attention.
That was
So,
really
that-
Christopher.
Now, Shantideva goes into sex and sensual pleasures and the attraction that we have for that, and to develop an understanding of what's going on. Okay, so he says he goes into a long description about how we can become completely infatuated with someone we're attracted to, completely infatuated, and the techniques that Shantideva uses are to say, all right, well, let's look at the body, because what we're getting infatuated. Are you infatuated with the person's body, or are you infatuated with the person's mind? So you look. The first thing, he looks at the body, and he says, if you actually think about it, and Rabina talks about this all the time. If you think about what's actually going on in the body, if we found any of the things just like lying on the ground, like an organ or some of these procreative fluids, we would be, that's disgusting. That is just disgusting. And yet that's what's in the body right there, you know, under the skin all the time. Venerable Rabina and His Holiness said, we're basically, I mean, the reason there are sewers is because of us. Because of all of our excrement, everything we put into our mouth, the food at the restaurants that we were thinking so delicious, so wonderful, blah, 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 it just turns into shit, you know? And all of the urine and all of this stuff, that's what goes into the sewers. The Rabina says, if you think about it, we're walking sewers. That's what the bodies are. So Shantideva and His Holiness and Buddhism in general is saying, when you examine the body in that light, because even if you took the most beautiful body you can imagine, but then all the skin was peeled away, you'd go, ugh. And as soon as somebody dies, well, what happened to the love of that body? It's not the body. So then they go, well, is it the mind? Is it the mind that we're infatuated with? And you go, well, there's nothing to grasp there. The mind, it's not a thing I can actually hold on to and grasp. So the point, where it comes to is that what happens when we're infatuated? We look at somebody and we think they are 100% wonderful. They're 100% beautiful or handsome, or they're 100% kind and 100% great, you know? And so we go into relationships this way. You know, this is how people get together. And after a period of time, we realize this person that I'm now spending all this time with is not actually 100% wonderful and 100% beautiful and 100% kind and 100%, honest and all this kind of thing. And so that is actually the point then, when we finally get, because it's all a projection. We are projecting onto people what we want, the thing that we're desiring. And it's all taking place in our mind. We're projecting. So when that projection, when that bubble is burst, when we're living with somebody and we find out, holy cow, wait a minute, they're not who I thought they were at all. These people can be difficult. That's the point in a relationship where you actually let go of the projection and you make a decision, either to love the person or to leave the person. And that's when you actually can have a real relationship. You make that decision to love them. Sometimes you have to leave them because it's so, it can be so bad. And that's what you should do if it's that bad. If they're beating you or something like that, you should. But it's important for us to realize all this infatuation, all this, well, he talks about it in terms of sexual attraction, all of that, the majority, I should say, 99.9% is going on in our own mind. I mean, think about it. If sex was sex and it was good all the time, this wonderful thing, well, why isn't everybody doing it all the time? It doesn't work that way. There are times where you go, I don't even feel like that. I don't want to do that. So it's in the mind. The mind is the thing that's running that show, and we have to recognize that. So this is what Shantideva is trying to tell the celibate monks, or things like that. When you think, he spends a lot of time on this, and it's because of that, because his audience at the time was actually the celibate monks, and that's a big deal. If somebody's trying to maintain this celibacy for whatever their reasons are, then they still have the feelings that everybody else has. So it has to be, and it's totally working on the mind. I think Robert Thurman was talking about this whole issue with this holiness, and he said, Robert Thurman was, I think, in his 20s when he met His Holiness, and Robert Thurman himself became a monk for a period of years. And he said, there was nothing like that going on. There was nothing like what you hear about, like in the other kinds of religions and what happens with priests and things like that. There was nothing like that going on that he was aware of, and never was there anything from His Holiness like that. So we just have to be wise, and not believe everything we're told, especially from the media. Oh yeah. But he goes into that whole business about desire.
In general, our attitude about, say, sexual pleasure eventually gets to be like our attitude about having a beautiful steak dinner. Like, it's just another.
It's all sensual.
It's not a special category, and
There's when the Buddhism gets into Tantra, however, they do talk about the energy that's created with that, sort of like
desire,
the desire. You can transform that energy into something that will actually can take you to Buddhahood. So it's similar to how they use the energy of anger, which we normally think of as a bad thing. And I'm not saying that sex is a bad thing, but in anger, we're talking about something that can be a bad thing. That anger, the energy of anger, sort of quickens things up. And I don't know if you've ever been angry and you have tasks to do, you go through them really quickly because you're going to get this done because you're so angry. But you can be angry about something else, but you actually start accomplishing things. So there's an energy to anger that accomplishes things.
It worked for a while.
Yeah. So there are some tantric deities, Yamantaka is a good example of one, that takes that energy of anger and gets things done,
But don't you have to
and cuts through
you have to get
the
rid
bull.
of your preferences before you can get to that point.
You have to do a lot of, you have to do a lot of work.
Here I am. No, you
No,
have to,
no. You have to do work.
Yeah.
You have to do work on your mind. That's what the meditation is about, So let's see, the final thing we get into here. We'll start a little bit on this. He talks also about attraction to wealth and possessions. This is again with the 8 worldly dharmas. And he says, the pain of gaining, keeping, and of losing all. See the endless hardships brought on us by property. For those distracted by their love of wealth, there is no chance for freedom from the sorrows of existence. They indeed, possessed of many wants, will suffer many troubles, all for very little. They're like the ox that pulls the cart and catches bits of grass along the way. So for the smallest of pleasures, we can waste our human lives that are so hard to come by and such a precious opportunity for spiritual growth by being so attached to, the wealth, and the possessions can just own us after a while, Sometimes it's better to have less, really, But then he says in stanza 83, but with a millionth part of such vexation, enlightenment itself could be attained. For much less work than it takes to, keep things going in samsara and try and get all the wealth and the property and the spouse and all this kind of stuff. For much less work, you could get enlightened.
Wow, that's bad.
But with a millionth part of that, vexation. So those who crave are plagued far more than those engaged upon the path. Yet Buddhahood is not what they attain, those people who crave. They just this is what we do. We just keep going around and around. That's what samsara is. Up and down and up and down. A wheel, like a carousel, just going around and around and around. And sometimes the horse is up and sometimes the horse is down, And we have to sort of pull off of that, step off of that. So now he gets into the main bodhicitta meditation practice, which we'll actually do next week, which is equalizing and exchanging self with others. And he says in chapter 1, Shantideva said, the mighty Buddhas, pondering for many eons, have seen that this and only this will save the boundless multitudes of beings and bring them easily to supreme joy. So what he's talking about is bodhicitta. And so the main practice of bodhicitta is this exchanging self with others and equalizing self with others. It's about seeing that everybody is the same in that we all want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. So he starts to talk about this. There's even a Tibetan saying that says beings have the same taste. We're the same in this very fundamental way. No matter whether the friends, the enemies, the strangers, the media, corporate guys, or whoever it is, we're all the same. And that's how we need to start looking at it. He says in stanza 91, the hand and other limbs are many and distinct, but all are one. The body to be kept in garden. So all the parts of our body work as the whole body. And so he's saying this is the way it is. It's the same with beings. Different beings in their joys and sorrows are like me, all one in wanting happiness. He says, this pain of mine does not afflict or cause discomfort to another's body. My pain doesn't cause comfort to another's body. And yet, this pain is hard for me to bear because I cling and take it for my own. And other beings' pain, I don't feel. And yet, because I take them for myself, their suffering is mine and therefore hard to bear. That's saying when you've actually done this process and you see other beings as yourself. It's sort of like a mother who has a child is in huge distress. Well, the mother is so connected, so close to that child. It's as if she's feeling the pain of the child. And Shantideva says, this is how we can actually become. We can become that we feel, we can see all the various types of pain. There's psychological pain. There's pain that people don't even recognize they're in. But we as bodhisattvas can learn to see it and it becomes unbearable. So we train to find out the best ways, ultimately to become a Buddha. We would be omniscient and we would know exactly what to do, what to say. And it could seem like a very nice thing. It could seem like a harsh thing, but a Buddha would know exactly the thing to do or say that would help somebody. And wouldn't that be just incredible to have that? And so that's the way he's saying we need to start thinking in these terms and motivating ourselves to get it into that, go in that direction and achieve that so that we can be of benefit. he goes into this very interesting thing. And it's about identifying with other beings. So he talks about he says something in stanza 97, which is interesting. And it says, since the pain of others does no harm to me, since somebody else's pain, I don't feel it, it's not doing any harm to me, I don't shield myself from it. So why do I guard against my future pain? You know, I'm thinking, you know, we think, you know, I have to do such and such and such a thing so that I won't have cancer or I won't have this pain. You know, we're worrying about our future pain, right? Why do I guard against my future pain, which does no harm to me right now, this present me, that's doing no harm to me now, right? So he's sort of making this argument, why don't I care about the pain that's doing no harm to me that's somebody else's? But I care about the pain that's doing no harm to me now because it's my future pain that I'm caring about. He goes into that, and that brings up a whole big thing about the what a person is, what a continuum is, and what the correct understanding of impermanence is, which is fascinating. So this is coming from Wulstan Fletcher. According to the teachings on impermanence, there's gross impermanence and there's subtle impermanence. Gross impermanence is what happens when, you know, you break a cup, you drop it, and the cup smashes into pieces. That's gross impermanence. The question is, how is it possible for a cup to move from existence into non-existence? According to the Buddhist way of looking at it, it's because the cup is not a stable, individual, unchanging entity. A cup can be divided into smaller and smaller particles, a lot like atomic theory. I mean, Buddhism, way back when, they were talking about small particles like atoms and things before scientists had even discovered this. So it can be broken up into these tiny, you know, more and more smaller parts. But it can also be divided into smaller and smaller instants of time, instants. Even the short moment of a finger snap can be divided into many, many parts. And this is an interesting visual that Wulstan Fletcher gives. If you have a stacked pile of 100 lotus leaves, right? A stacked pile is going up 100 lotus leaves, and you drive a nail through it, boom, that's one moment. But there are 100 lotus leaves that nail went through. So it shows you there are 100 instants in that moment that you went through. And so on until you can get down to, I mean, some of the Buddhist schools of tenet say you can get down to one moment that is, you know, you can't find any other moment. But if you get into the higher view, they say, so this.
What do you mean?
That there isn't, that it's just, you can keep breaking it down and down. It's infinite. It's infinite. Yeah. The specific Buddhist view here is that when you observe change in a thing, it's not that something is actually getting older, but that each individual moment, the thing is replaced moment by moment, according to its subtle impermanence. This is vastly different from what science is talking about. Science hasn't even gone there. There are a few people, scientist minds I've heard talk about something very similar to this, that every moment, every trillionth of a second or something, everything in the universe is completely collapses and replaces. And it's a very unusual way of looking at it, but this is the Buddhist view. So, so the cup is there one moment, and it's replaced by another cup in the next moment. We think of it as being a single cup because it happens so quickly. For instance, and this is a really good example, when you see someone whirling a firebrand, right, in the dark, what you see is just a circle of fire, but actually it's points of light. If you could slow that down, you know, if you filmed it and slow it down on each frame, you would see point. It's very much like movies. You know, when we watch a movie, it all seems like, oh, this is just happening, it's flowing. We're not quick enough to see each individual frame or pixel.
Yeah.
Now it's pixels, each individual pixel. We're not quick enough to see that, but that's actually what's happening. So it's kind of fascinating. So Nagarjuna, who's the expert on emptiness, says that to think something completely ceases to exist is the extreme view of what Buddhism calls nihilism. Nothing actually ceases to exist. That's nihilism, and if you get into nihilism, it can be quite dangerous because you can think you're just falling into a pit of nothingness. To think that something continues to exist from moment to moment is the next extreme view of permanence, and this is the view that we all have, and that we get so upset when things change because we want them to stay the same. We think sort of like intuitively or in our gut that things are permanent, even though we know they're not. We think I'm permanent, even though we know I am not permanent. So so that's an extreme view, that permanence and then the nihilism. These are two extremes which are mistaken views, actually, according to Buddhism. So whereas we tend to think there's an individual self that passes through life from one moment to the next, going through, according to the Buddhist view, there isn't an individual, unchanging substance that passes through time. Rather, there are individual instants that are constantly being replaced. We get the apparent continuity in a phenomenon without something actually passing from one moment to the next. The fact that we see it as a continuum is just because we're not quick enough to notice each moment. So when we talk about rebirth or our self existing sometime in the future, according to this view, it's not that you yourself have passed from this moment into the next moment or from this life into the next life, but rather there is a constant continuum which goes into the future. The future you is not the present you. The past you is not the present you. I mean, I remember Geshe Drapa saying this all the time, kind of scratching my head and I go, well, it was me when I was little. But he was pointing out this, that, so it goes back to this thing that Shantideva said. So the future you is not the present you, although there's obviously a dependently arising connection there. And Shantideva is saying that a future you is as alien from the present you as the person next to you in the present moment. Right? So this is the answer to the objection that he puts. Why should I bother about the suffering of others when it's not my suffering, yet at the same time I'm bothered about my future suffering, which is also not my suffering? So he says it's kind of a way of equalizing this. So you begin to see, yeah, your suffering and the other guy's suffering it's the same. Yes, we should be concerned. It's all suffering. What we don't want pain. We don't want that. Whether it's somebody else's pain or my pain, it's all pain. So we want to sort of put an end to that. And so this is how we begin to, and almost like you're approaching it from a wisdom point of view rather than a compassion point of view. You're approaching this from a wisdom point of view, going, why does it make sense to be concerned about somebody else's pain when I don't feel it? Because it's pain. I'm existing now, they're existing now, it's pain. It's like a mother. I'm sure you've had experiences when you were kids, when they were babies, or now when they're in terrible trouble. You feel that pain. A father does too. Yeah. But mothers, my goodness, the baby grew in them. And there's a strong, strong connection. So that's the way we need to be starting to feel about others, So I found that extremely interesting, this whole business about impermanence. There are certain things in Buddhism which are, you need to develop the right view. One of them is karma. You've got to develop the right view of karma. Another is emptiness and dependent arising. You have to develop the correct view of that. And impermanence. You've got to understand impermanence, how it works, what it means. So these are it's really important stuff. So, so to compartmentalize suffering into your suffering and my suffering, it's like Wulstan Fletcher says, it's like taking space and trying to cut it with a pair of scissors. We shouldn't it's all suffering. It's all suffering. We are all part of one body, you could say. And that whole body if any part of the body is suffering, we're suffering along with it. This is true. We just don't actually feel it. You know? But when the world suffers, we suffer. We know this.
That's the correct,
Yeah.
that's the one view.
Yeah, right. Because we're all interconnected. We're part of it. This is the view we have to be having. So, of course, until we become enlightened, we won't have the omniscient skill to help others completely remove their suffering. But as bodhisattvas, we don't wait until then. We start now. You start now. And actually, by starting now, we're developing the pathway to Buddhahood. That's what we have to do. We have to start now. So that's part one of this chapter. And the next chapter, the very last thing about, he says this practice, Shantideva, again, argues with himself. And he says this practice of compassion and feeling of concern for others is so disturbing. It causes me pain. In other words, he's saying my compassion for others is causing me pain. And then Shantideva, arguing again with himself, says, come off it. You know, I mean, the fact that you're suffering because you have compassion is nothing compared to, the suffering of all sentient beings in every realm. So just like get over it, and imagine. And then the final thing he says, imagine how happy, how wonderful you'll feel, when the ocean-like immensity of joy arising, when all beings will be freed. Will this not be enough? Isn't that enough for you? Will this not satisfy? And then the final thing he says, the wish for my own freedom. What's that to me? Because our own freedom is connected to everyone else's freedom. So this is the view, the point we have to get to. So it's taking wisdom, it's taking compassion, and again, it's putting them together. And that's where the real power of Buddhism is. So we will quickly just do a quick dedication first, and when we will go into Tibetan 101. All right, so let's just do the final dedication. It's on the bottom of page 3, and we'll do it in English. And think of Lama Zopa here. Think of Geshe Nima. Think of Geshe Drakpa. Think of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Think of all the gurus you know. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma. Fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths, may I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. May we speedily attain, enlightenment for the benefit of all.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, brothers and sisters.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Christopher.
Oh, so lovely. Right, I will stop
All right, Tibetan.
recording and start anew.
That's right.
That's right.